We are now live. Welcome everyone for the pre-event. We're preparing for the Growth Hackers Conference 2020. And I'm so glad to have here with us today a group of our speakers. I see that people are already commenting on the chat, saying they're excited for the panel. I bet you're also excited for the Growth Hackers Conference as much as I am. Please comment here. Tell us where you are, what session are you most excited about for the Growth Hackers Conference. And without further ado, I'll be calling our speakers here. They are not only our speakers, but they are also our teachers for the master classes that are coming September 2nd. So September 1st, we have the conference lineup of amazing speakers. We'll be talking about that in a minute. And on September 2nd, we have our teachers coming with some workshops, some master classes that are very hands-on, so we can dig deeper into subjects that are mostly important specifically for growth teams. Hello, everyone, saying hi on the chat now. And I'm going to be calling them one by one, starting with Sean. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Amelia. Hi, everyone.
Hi, how's it going? All good?
It's going very well.
Yeah, awesome. Sean, you have a couple of talks for us, one on September 1st, and another one is a masterclass on September 2nd for the Growth Hackers Conference. What are you bringing for the conference this year?
So, when you first reached out to me, you talked about we wanted to look into the future of growth and how all of this tech is really kind of pushing growth forward. Things like AI and some of the complexities that could potentially superpower things that we're doing. And what I'm seeing still is that so many of the fundamentals are lacking. And at the end of the day, things from caveman time still matter, that people are driven by fears and motivations. And ultimately, if you can't truly understand value and amplify that value, then you're not going to be able to retain customers and you're not going to be able to grow. So I'm going to start the day off on the keynote with just really going back to the basics of what does it take to actually drive growth by understanding value and amplifying that value.
That's amazing. And
so,
how about the second day? What are you preparing for us for the master class on September 2nd?
Yeah, so the master class is really about company-wide alignment. And, it's something that there's a mix of startups and more established companies that are going to be in the master class. But I think it's something that startups have the opportunity to build things right so that they don't run into the problems that bigger companies have. But the reality is, as companies scale, you go from people who are wearing lots of hats and have kind of cross-discipline skills and understanding of the business. Everyone's on the same page in the beginning, to the point where with that specialization comes silos, and with silos comes different goals, and more the organization becomes disjointed, and it's a lot harder to effectively execute a growth process. And so I had a ton of feedback from people who've read my book that's where they were running into problems. They get excited, maybe even their growth team gets excited, but the organization itself prevents them from running testing in the high leverage opportunities. And so that's what I'm going to be talking a lot about, is how do you get everyone back on the same page so that you can effectively align everyone in the same direction. And that ultimately the fastest growing companies are not ones that are driven by a single growth hacker or by even a growth team, but when everyone across the entire organization is mobilized to accelerate growth, is on the same page around how growth works, is working off the same key metric. And it shouldn't be that hard to get everyone on the same page, because ultimately there's a mission in the business. There's goals that should be, ways of quantifying that mission. And if you can get everyone on the same page around how do we quantify progress against that mission, how do we ensure we're all on the same page, we have the same idea of what the machine looks like that moves those metrics forward, then you just need to buy into the test learn process and that everything can be improved, and it becomes a lot easier to be successful with growth. And so that's
apparently aligning those vectors and gathering everyone to point the same direction, that's really challenging. It's something that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, but on a daily basis, it is where the first challenges are, for sure.
Absolutely, and it's something that it's really hard to kind of gradually create that alignment. So it is much more of a big bang event where you need to get everyone on the same page. And so a lot of the masterclass is going to be based on the workshops that I do, where I have hundreds of people in the room at the same time, all getting on the same page. And so I know we're not going to quite have it set up that way here, but at least I can give people the insights of what I've seen work really well. And hopefully, whether you're in your own organization or you're a consultant to other organizations, I'll give some ideas of ways that you can really catalyze that growth and kick off getting everyone on the same page and really unlocking the breakout growth that we all strive for, but is elusive for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that will add a lot of value for growth professionals working in mid-sized enterprise companies. We do have some questions coming in. Sure. I will get to those questions, you guys. Just 1 second. I want to bring in another of our speakers and masterclass teachers. It's Eric Keating from AppQs. Hello, Eric. Welcome here on our panel, our warm-up for the Growth Hackers Conference 2020. Eric, I want to know, you are also bringing, just as Sean, you're bringing a talk on the first day of the conference, September 1st, and then your masterclass on September 2nd. Can you talk a little bit about the talk first on September 1st? I know that you have a very interesting topic, in my opinion, super timely for product-led growth. You'll be talking to us about how to transform your product onboarding. Is that right?
Yeah. So the name of the talk is, your product is your new landing page. And we're going to talk a little bit about the role your product plays now in your prospects' buying experience and how the role of that has changed so much over the last year, 5 years, 10 years. We all know that people don't really love to talk to salespeople anymore. They love to get their hands on the product and try it before they buy it. And so in this new world, right, like what your product has to do, especially that initial experience with your product, is very similar to what we used to think, the landing page used to was the purpose that served. And the reason what kind of sparked this is, as we at AppQs were going through our own onboarding experience, what we realized is that so many people who were starting to use our product, they hadn't really had all of the chance to do all the education, read thoroughly through the website, talk to somebody on our team. They just they get to our website, oh, this looks interesting, let me start a trial. Yeah. And then at that point, the level of familiarity with the product is so low. What do we need to do with this onboarding experience to really prepare them to be successful? Is it getting them right into using it? Or is it trying to do some of the education that a landing page or a marketing site used to do first? And so I'm going to talk about that, some of the data that we pulled from surveys to help support this, and then how you can start thinking about your onboarding experience differently, your product experience differently to play that role effectively.
That's amazing. And you're going a little bit deeper than that and showcasing also AppQs as a success story. And that will come to play specifically on the masterclass on September 2nd. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're bringing for this masterclass?
Yeah, the next, so basically taking that topic and going the next level deeper. So what can you actually do to deliver that effective experience? So we'll be diving into real world examples of, how some companies that we all know and love have approached their initial product experiences, diving into kind of analyzing why they approached it a certain way. I actually have some examples of how some of these companies used to approach their onboarding, how it's evolved over the last few months or years, and I'll be working with the folks in that workshop to understand why these companies approach it this way, and then what they can do with their own products to identify their activation moment and how to get new users to that activation moment as quickly as possible. So we'll be doing a little hands-on training and analysis on onboarding.
Wow, I can barely wait for that. I'm sure going to invite our own growth team to come to this masterclass. I think it's super timely for everybody right now. I agree that product-led growth is taking over the what we used to call the marketing funnel or the sales funnel. And we have another masterclass teacher here with us today that will be talking precisely on that, and that's Sam Richard. Sam from OpenView. Welcome to our panel, Sam. I think we have a bit of delay. Okay, you're on mute, Sam. I'll try to unmute you myself. Here. Hello.
I can hear Amelia. I can hear everyone else, though.
Awesome.
So Amelia, she's saying that she can't hear you, but she can hear everyone else.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Sam? No, not yet? Okay. Sam, I'll be calling you again in a minute. You probably can hear what I'm saying.
She's going to call you again in a minute, Sam.
Awesome. Thank you.
She cannot hear. It's just me. Oh, okay. Got it. I'll call in Andy then, but I'm super curious to learn more about what Sam is bringing to the masterclass. I know that she has over 150, if I'm not mistaken, benchmarks of many companies using product like growth right now, and she'll be helping us understand a little bit more about what is going on with these companies, who is succeeding, who's not, etc. So Andy, hello, how are you?
Hello.
Andy works for IBM, and Sean was talking to us a little bit earlier about how it is so challenging to align all the vectors, align all the team, break silos to make growth work. And your masterclass will also go deeper on that in precisely for enterprise companies. So you'll be talking to growth professionals in enterprise companies and helping them align everything for growth to work, all the processes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks. And first of all, thanks for inviting me to this panel. It's certainly humbling to be in the midst of all these great growth leaders. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, when Sean was talking, I felt a little bit like I was going to be skiing in his wake. Some of the topics that I wanted to talk about were how to build a growth culture. My background in IBM, I helped build the Watson growth team. And then I worked to launch, either myself or with my team to launch a series of growth teams. And I've also worked in individual teams. So kind of had the practitioner, consultant type of experience. And what I really found was so much of the success of the growth team, it absolutely is getting everybody to align around a metric. And I have some scars to show where we tried to tackle a few metrics. That didn't work. You really got to do that one North Star metric. But it's also about the right culture, the culture from the top down, making sure the people up at the top understand value growth and are focused on the same objectives. But then from the bottom up, you got to have the right people who are going to drive that execution. And you really got to have both to be successful. And so there's a lot of things that I've learned in working with different teams that will help a growth leader drive the right growth culture. But also on the bottom up, if you don't have that culture, how do you drive that, upwards into the organization? So that's going to be really important. And then the other thing, again, that both Sean and Eric talked about is really some practical advice that I've found to be successful in IBM. And how do you get people started on the right process? If you're starting from scratch, it's really easy. Well, I shouldn't say easy, but it's easier to build a growth team. But if you have to sort of inject a growth team into a well-established business with cultures and processes, it's a lot different. You're asking people to change the way that they work, change the tools that they use, change the priorities. So it's really important to talk about practically how do you get started, and then even getting down to the level of the tools that you use, and A/B testing and nurture and onboarding. How can you think about building your experiment backlog with some of those tools? So I'm hoping to touch on a few of these topics at a higher level. But then certainly, Eric and Sean will be going in much deeper in certain areas. So I think that collectively, all the talks should kind of build a really good picture of some of these topics that we've been touching on.
Definitely. Thanks, Andy. I'll bring Sam in again. Sam, can you now hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you for that so much, Amelia.
Awesome. That's just great. Thank you so much. Sam Richard works for OpenView, and they just launched this amazing guide, research and a study on product-led growth. And I mean, there's so much in this study, to be honest. we do our state of growth once a year, and we are also bringing some of the results of this report on the conference. It's part of the agenda. We're closing the first day with that. But on your study, you go deeper into SaaS businesses, right?
Yeah.
So I want to learn more about what are these benchmarks that you are bringing for the masterclass, and what do the masterclass attendees can take from that?
Yeah, so at OpenView, we love benchmarks. So we've been doing our SaaS benchmarks for years now, which tend to be more financial metrics. But this year I decided, we talk a lot about product metrics and KPIs, and what do those look like at other companies, especially early on in their stage and their growth, where they may not have financial metrics yet. So we asked a lot of the questions that you guys are going to talk about today, such as do you have an activation metric? What percentage of your folks get to activation? Those kinds of questions that are very modern and folks are asking, especially when they have a freemium product. But I think what was most fascinating was really following that thread of how someone enters the product, or how the majority of your folks get to the product, and then how you engage with them and how you retain them, and how those impact your sort of end of the line financial metrics and your growth rates and those sorts of things. So in this talk, I'll be specifically talking about churn and retention, and how that ties back to acquisition. And I found some really interesting things from the 150 or so companies that we surveyed based on how they're actually acquiring those customers and what that customer tends to do later on in their life cycle with the product. Wow, that's amazing. We do have one question that I think your benchmark, your study also touches. It comes from Grace. She says, hello, Sean. Hello, growth hackers. She's asking about business growth, how to scale in this pandemic. And I know that you approach a little bit of the early COVID impacts for businesses on this study, right, Sam? Can you touch a little bit on that? Yes. So the one thing that I really touched on in the study, we didn't have a ton of data since I actually did the survey mid-March, which was a terrible time to be doing a survey, but luckily it was on Q4 of 2020. But what I was tracking was we have our PLG index, so companies that are product-led, that are publicly traded, and actually turn that against the SaaS index, so the publicly traded SaaS companies. And we found that companies that are product-led, that sort of lead with their product and have this freemium offering, are doing, they're trading at valuations that are 10x higher. So if you think of companies that are doing really well in this environment, it's like Slack, it's like Zoom. And we think a large part of it is the fact that they are product-led. So making sure that people can access your product and get in there, given where they are in the world and given, what time zones and things like that people are working on. When you're relying heavily on field sales or having someone call and reach out to someone, it can be really challenging to orchestrate that from afar. Yeah, and Sean, Eric, do you have anything to add for Grace, how to scale in this pandemic? I know, Sean, you get this question a lot from your followers or people that read your book, want to know if it's still relevant right now. I'm sure it is, but can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the business sector that you're in. That some business sectors are doing really well right now, and in fact, are doing even better. So, mental health. I've actually been interviewing a lot of leaders in fast-growing companies on the Breakout Growth podcast. So, I interviewed the CEO for Mir, like Peloton. So, remote fitness, at-home fitness solutions obviously are exploding right now. Of course, the Zooms of the world are exploding. But you also, interestingly, like cannabis use shot way up. It's legal in California. And so I interviewed the leading distributor of cannabis, and they're, for lack of a better word, their business is on fire, is smoking. But yeah, so I think you're finding that it really depends on the businesses. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I spent years working at, years advising and working at Eventbrite, and clearly that business, they should not be trying to accelerate right now. They should be really focused on helping their event organizers navigate the challenges of an event in a pandemic, and how to provide value to past attendees, and all the things that the Growth Hackers team is doing with the Growth Hackers event, and being a great resource to double down on existing relationships. But they should not be pouring a bunch of money into trying to acquire new event organizers. That would be a really fast way to put themselves out of business. So I think your response to the pandemic is really how exposed is your business to the pandemic, and for some, they should be stepping on the gas and really just accelerating the growth process. And it should always be constrained, in my mind anyway. Not everyone's on the same page, but should be constrained by positive ROI activities. And so if you can aggressively scale customer growth and acquisition and retention and do it profitably, then you're probably in a sector that's less exposed to the pandemic. And if you're finding that things that used to be profitable are no longer profitable, then it's probably more about batten down the hatches and try to survive this thing as a business until things get better, so that you have enough fuel in the tank to scale when you can scale the business.
Yeah, definitely. The growth process also helps you test things first, and that goes not only for new investments, but also for maybe lines that you want to cut, resources you want to shut down. You should always experiment first before you do that. I believe it was a Harvard professor that published a study recently on how companies in 2008, during the last crisis, how we had many companies not surviving for cutting too deep. So if you don't test, if you don't experiment first, and you go blindly changing your business instead of using the growth mindset, I also believe that can be dangerous. What do you think, Eric? What are you recommending right now for your customers, for your for the companies that surround FQs?
Yeah. So like Sean said, it totally depends on your business and how it's going. But if you are like most businesses, I think a few simple recommendations. One is focus on your existing customer base. If acquisition is going to be slower, which it is for most companies right now, retaining your existing customers, finding expansion opportunities with your existing customers is the most important thing you can do. So even if it is not traditionally part of your purview to focus on retention and expansion of existing customers, please, I'd encourage almost any business right now to be allocating more resources to that. It's way more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain an existing one. And by focusing on your existing customer base and by trying to deliver more value to those you already have, you're going to continue to generate that goodwill and positive word of mouth that impacts every business that is able to that's able to achieve that. I think another is if your value prop can be kind of reframe, not saying change your value prop as a business, but if you can kind of speak to the times we're living in. For our business, we help with a lot of different areas of the life cycle of a customer, but most relevant right now is retention and retaining customers. So we kind of shifted our messaging a little bit to emphasize the retention aspect versus the growth aspect. And that's just, that's the way we're thinking about our business. That's the way we know a lot of our customers are thinking about it. So by making that shift, you can kind of be a little more timely and relevant to where most people's heads are at right now. And then, lastly, like it's already been said, if you have programs that, I'm talking about acquisition, marketing programs that are experimental, you're kind of throwing money out there to kind of see what works. Probably time to scale those back, double down on the things that work really well. For us, retargeting has been huge, so we've just poured more money into that. If there's anything, like I said, any of those dollars that you can kind of reinvest into retention-focused activities, I'd definitely recommend that right now.
Definitely. We have, thank you so much, Eric. Thanks, Sean. We have another question here that I think Andy could help us answer. Is from Elton Kua he's from Asia. He asked another question on different markets that I want to bring in a minute. And he's asking, is there a specific growth process playbook suitable for industries like manufacturing or SaaS? Andy, you bring a very interesting playbook for enterprise companies. Do you think this playbook can be used by different industries as well, growth teams in manufacturing as well as SaaS? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm just kind of thinking through, the concepts that are in the enterprise growth playbook, ebook. And the devil's always in the details, but in an abstract sense, the value in a framework is it should be sort of rigid enough that it can kind of point people in direction, but loose enough in that it allows a lot of flexibility. And I think that when I think through some of the concepts in the playbook, building the right culture, practical process, working with users, understanding the value that they bring, all those things are very universal. So I would say that, absolutely, you can use these sort of playbooks in any kind of industry. Because I really believe at the core, growth is really about find that market, understand those users, what can you do better, differently than all your competition or existing alternatives, and, do that thing. That's really what it's about. If you can do that really well, you're going to succeed. And using experimentation and data to really understand your users to drive new opportunities and growth is really kind of the means to that end. So I think that is very universal. I think where you'll start to see differences is really in the tactics that you pursue. Putting an app or a web page out, you can make a lot of changes really quickly and iterate. But if you're doing something in a manufacturing sense, you can't iterate as quickly. You have a lot more overhead. So there will be those changes in some of the tactics. But I think that's where you can be really creative in how you, I guess I'd say it like this. If you have an idea or an experiment, something that you want to understand, really the core idea is, how can I learn this thing with the least amount of time, the least amount of cost, as quickly as I can? That's the idea. So there's a lot of really creative ways that you can do that if you just think about it. Without getting into too much detail, I know in previous roles when I worked at small and startup kind of companies, we had a lot of flexibility. When you work for a company like IBM, you don't have all those same flexibilities. You can't announce a product that doesn't exist. But there are other ways that we could do those sort of testing with like user interviews and sponsor customers, where you could get the same sort of feedback, a little bit different. You could get the same sort of feedback without like announcing a product that doesn't exist. So I think, the answer would be, yes, the framework and playbook applies. The challenge for you is how to be creative and thinking about, reducing time and cost and getting to that insight quicker. That just requires some creativity.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. I think that Elton is a great way to think about your different the different applications of the growth process and the playbook. Sean, Elton here also asks a question on markets and how the growth process applies in different markets. You have traveled a lot, not right now in 2020 for obvious reasons, but you have traveled a lot to Latin America, Europe, Asia, bringing the growth methodology to companies in so many different industries. What have you found so far in terms of the similarities and how the growth process fits in a different way between these different markets?
Got to get that mute button. I think at the end of the day, there's not a different scientific process in each region of the world. The scientific process is similar, and growth hacking is really just the scientific process. It's analyzing the situation and figuring out how you might be able to drive improvements, coming up with hypotheses and how you can drive improvements, coming up with experiments to drive those improvements, and analyzing the results, and just getting smarter about how you grow a business. And so I think the basic growth process is the same everywhere in the world. What's going to work, the tactics and the channels and what people respond to and page layouts and all of that's going to often be pretty different. You can be a lot text heavier in parts of Asia than you might be, in parts of Europe where you want to have a lot of white space and and clean interface, but you don't know what's going to work until you test things. And so I think that's one of the big differences just in the tactics. Obviously, WeChat's going to be a great channel. All the kind of Tencent properties going to be a great channel in Europe, where in the United States it's less of a channel. And so channels are going to be different. And then sometimes you find some of the just cultural differences in team. That would be another area where it can be different. I think it's particularly in Asia, it's a lot easier to get the teams working together on the same page. The kind of shared mission seems to be something that you don't have as much of that challenge as you have in the United States or Brazil, where you have fiercely independent people and getting them working together on the same page can be a lot more challenging. And so a lot more focus on, big mission. I mean, what kind of taking a step back to the earlier question as well about, the pandemic and how people are doing. One of the things I noticed is that the more mission-driven businesses are, the better they've navigated the pandemic, because they can think of, okay, there's a different means to execute on the mission. And so, I think mission is going to be important anywhere in the world, and sort of a shared vision on what you're trying to create. But where teams have hurdles can be different. The other thing is in risk for experiments. So you have some areas that are a lot more risk adverse. So they're going to be very timid on the types of experiments that they run, where other countries can be a lot more bold on that. So you're going to have to overcome the challenges of creating an environment where risk is tolerated and failure is tolerated and accepted as part of the process. In Silicon Valley, that's usually not a huge hurdle, but in parts of Asia or Europe, it can be a really big challenge. And so even the kind of idea of minimum viable tests or products, in Germany, you don't see that as much. They tend to kind of over-engineer solutions, so it's going to slow your pace of learning and experimentation. So I think people need to understand in their own culture what can potentially slow down your ability to execute the process. But at the end of the day, the test-learn process is going to be pretty similar across the board. I think in Eastern Europe and Russia and parts of Asia, the data side, actually people are really good at math in a lot of those countries. And so they're gonna be able to get their heads around the data side a lot more. And data is clearly really important to this process. And so in the United States, probably people need to work a little bit harder to get really proficient in data to be able to make sure they're making the right decisions. So again, I think that the playbook's the same. The challenge is going to be different in the parts that are easy to implement and the parts where you're going to have challenges.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Sam, we have a question here that I think you can help answer. Gustavo Dibai, he asks, what should I do to start a growth process in a company that is small and don't have people focused only in growth, on growth? And you work with a lot of startups, and I imagine many of them sometimes want to dig deeper into product growth or the growth process, and they don't have all the resources. What do you help them? How do you help them, and what do you say?
I think focus is really important when you're thinking about any startup. I've seen so many startups fail just because they want to sort of boil the ocean in a lot of ways. In terms of personnel, I highly recommend bringing folks in from different departments. I feel like growth is definitely a team sport. It's not made for individuals just to manage on their own, and you're going to run into a lot of friction, which I'm sure anyone on this call could talk about. But from running a growth process, I think about it in a lot of ways. I think that there are a lot of legs to this chair, unfortunately. One of the first things I always recommend is that people are measuring what they're doing. I've actually run into a lot of startups, even at OpenView, where they've been growing organically and they've been growing really well, but they've had a challenge measuring what people are doing in the product. And they start doing it almost a little too late, so they can't actually form any real insights from that until it's been many years since they began. So I always recommend, bringing in a tool, not over-engineering it, and really starting to understand at least what people's behaviors and what people's flows are. I've been working especially in the open source community, and that's always one of my recommendations, because it seems like everyone in that space in particular is very afraid to even ask signups what their email address is and those sorts of things. And I think it's really starting to collect data from your users, but ensuring that you're asking them for some value. in return. So I had to make a phone call to Slage Locks earlier this morning because my lock wasn't working because I have a Wi-Fi lock, which is really dumb. And before they even started talking to me, before they even made me smile, they were asking for my phone number and my email address and those sorts of things. And I found that incredibly annoying. So I always look at, for example, I think Docker has a really good onboarding experience where you can use the open source tool and they never ask you for anything. If you want to start getting updates from them, like updates to the tool, you can actually put in your email address. And if you put in your work email, you actually get more instances that are private. And they just keep having these things which are free. But in return, you're actually providing them more information for their records. And I think having that process in early on so that you can in turn start measuring who's coming and start figuring out who your segments are and start actually growing with intent is really one of the best things to put in place early on.
That's amazing. Thanks, Sam. Gustavo, you probably want to come to the Growth Hackers Conference too, man. I mean, the first day is packed with talks that could help you answer exactly that and kick off your growth process. I agree with Sam. Growth, it is definitely a team sport. And even if you don't have someone dedicated to growth, your product team, your engineering team, yourself, everyone should be focusing on growth early on. And that will definitely make things go, faster, or you can definitely improve your company as a whole by doing that. Stella asks something on how she can run researches and collect data from the market when her customers, her target audience are investment banks. Do any of you have any experience on this field? What would you say to Stella here?
I mean, I can talk a little bit about my process. Internally at OpenView, I'm constantly doing teardowns of S1s. I live on edgar.gov. I would start with really the public houses of this information. I would also say that financial Twitter is a black hole that will keep you up at night, but you should definitely get involved. One of my colleagues, Sean Fanning, he's really loud on financial Twitter, and I really appreciate him. And you can start really understanding how those folks are doing research. And a lot of them are coming from investment banks, or they have this investment banker background. And I would start checking those places out first. It's a really strong community.
Awesome. And an overall question for all of you. You're coming to the Growth Hackers Conference as speakers. I know that right now you must be with your schedules all packed with so many speaking gigs and so many panels like this one. It is a time where people seem to be a lot interested in learning, in online education. But I'd like to know from all of you, what do you think? Why now? Why right now? Why 2020 with everything that is happening? Why is the time for to attend an event like the Growth Hackers Conference, or take an online course, or educate yourself and improve your abilities, your skills, and think about your career moving forward? What do you think?
I can jump in on that. I think one of the big opportunities is that conference. I mean, I traveled 150,000 miles last year. This year, I'm not going to travel that much. I think that, when you look at particularly people that are not maybe in Silicon Valley, but, in different parts of the world, you have access today to probably more knowledge than you've ever had before. That conferences that are normally thousands of dollars it's deeply discounted or even free a lot of times. All of the travel costs that you would have, all of the time that you take out to travel, you're able to spend so much more time having that direct engagement with experts in any field that you can think of. I think that's the opportunity side. The interesting other side is that there's probably a lot of learning that people used to do that they're not doing now, that they're just not even realizing it. And it's in the commute podcast listening time. Everybody I know who has a podcast, the listenership kind of dropped significantly when people's commutes disappeared. And so either replacing that time with more conferences, or saying, okay, now schedule my daily podcast walk or get some exercise while you're doing it. But just, every day you need to focus on getting a little bit better. And over time, you're going to be world-class if you every day focus on getting a little bit better. And I think there's some great opportunities to get better, like the Growth Hackers Conference and so many conferences and speakers that are more available now than they may have been, or more accessible now than they may have been in the past.
Definitely. We used to have so many business missions at the Growth Hackers Conference, people coming from other countries, from Asia and Europe and Latin America. And we were actually capping the event this year around 800 people. And we were able to, it exploded after we decided to go online. People that would travel either from the US, from the East Coast to San Francisco to attend to the conference, they can do it now from home. They come from their homes or their home offices. And it goes for anyone around the globe. We are actually also recording everything. And if you're in Australia or Asia and watching us live, on a sleepless night, you can actually watch later or a couple hours later. No problem, you receive all the recordings too. Well, I also want to know, Andy, from you, in a time like this, how are you supporting your growth team? How are you supporting your team right now? What are you telling them? How are you helping them on their, not only their personal growth, but as well as on their jobs on a daily basis? And that question goes, I think, for all of the growth leaders listening to us right now. How can they help their growth team succeed in a time like this?
Right. That's a great question. I guess I would say for IBM, I'm fortunate enough that IBM was really a pioneer in working remote. So even before travel was reduced and all that, we had a lot of great tools for collaboration. So while we didn't get as much face-to-face time, we had a lot of great tools. If I wasn't in the situation where we were already well-versed in working remote, I think the things that I would be looking at would be probably these 2 or 3 things. One is quite simply the tools. We just in terms of collaboration, we're all very comfortable with things like Zoom and WebEx or whatever tool you're using. But there's also a lot of great tools out there for kind of virtual whiteboarding. One tool that I love is Murally. You can't get together and whiteboard. Murally is fantastic. So we do a lot of collaboration with tools like that, virtual stickies, mapping out processes, brainstorming sessions. So find those really awesome tools that help you collaborate virtually, I think is really important. And I think one of the other things too is, obviously work goes on and the needs of the business continue to go on, but people's personal lives have really changed dramatically. So I think that it's really important too to have a human side. So I've seen a lot of my peers and colleagues do just a lot of really fun things. One of my peers, when I worked in Watson, she was a development manager. She did like a virtual pizza party. Like she found out where all of her team lived. She bought pizza, sent it to everybody, and said, "Oh, we've got a meeting at such and such," and all of a sudden, pizza shows up to their house. So people are doing a lot of fun things like that just to really make the team still feel connected. Because I think it was Sam who said earlier, like bringing in the cross-functional collaboration. That's really the most important asset you have. Your people, their ideas, that collaboration. So you really just need to make sure that people are collaborating well. And you also need to take care of the people, make sure they're engaged, feel supported. You're not just kind of cracking the whip and saying produce. Really have that human side. And overall, that will help with the overall engagement of the team. I think those are probably, that would be applicable whether you're talking growth or just generally how do you work in a pandemic world. But those are the things that I would be focused on immediately.
Definitely, thanks, Angie. Eric, do you want to expand on that and tell us about how are you engaging with your team right now? I know that you've been working from home for a while now, and you have a pretty engaged team working with you. How are you keeping this engagement running? I think I lost you, Eric. Is everyone listening to?
Yeah, so
Eric?
I guess two things that we changed off the bat. So I know that this isn't a new concept, but for us it was moving to an agile marketing framework. So basically, we. Oh.
It was a delay there. Yeah, it's good now.
Sorry, can you hear me now? You can or cannot hear me. I'm not sure.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So you can hear me okay now? No, there still seems to be a very large delay. Okay, I'm going to start talking, assuming that you can hear me. Two major changes we made. One, moving to an agile marketing framework. So we are now breaking all of our work into 2-week sprints and planning out very meticulously what we're. Okay.
Oh, that's we lost his Eric's audio now. Video. We'll regroup here, and once Eric is back, I can ask him again. I was super into his answer. He was describing everything that he's doing in terms of the process and the sprints. I really want to know all about it. We can, of course, ask him again during the conference, and if he doesn't come back to the pre-event right now. But yes, and Sam, what are you telling the startups that work with you? How are you helping them on a time like this? And how are these growth leaders helping their teams? How are they organizing everything right now?
Yeah, so I can speak to sort of how I reacted early on as a firm. One thing that we sort of jumped on to provide value for the portfolio was to really understand how competitors were reacting to COVID-19. So were they doing massive layoffs? Were they doing any sort of churn mitigation models, like adding things for free or things to actually increase their acquisition? So we were calling them defensive and offensive strategies. So were people being offensive, like offering things for free for healthcare workers or things like that? Or were they being defensive? So when you would call in, would they offer something for you to not churn? And were they doing massive layoffs, massive cuts of like paid marketing, all of those things? So we jumped on the COVID-19 train and did a lot of those reports for our portfolio companies early on, just so they could have a feel of what their competition was doing and whether or not they should be doing something similar or different. And we were advising them pretty quickly early on too, especially from a financial perspective, like making sure that they had enough runway for 2 years or so. Luckily, we were incredibly conservative, and it seems like the environment has really begun to bounce back. I think from a team perspective, I have a toddler at home, so all I can say is, if you have a teammate who is a mother, you should probably ask her if she's okay. And I'm very lucky to have care in the home, but occasionally, you are the mother. And I think what's been really valuable to me is really cutting out useless meetings. Like we used to have a team stand up every morning where we would talk about what we were doing. And, attendance got really low. And at one point I was just like, why are we doing this? Like, we're all grown ups. We could be responsible here. If I need something else, lack someone. Like, I'm working really weird hours, like trying to manage life plus COVID. And I think really having faith in your team and trusting that they can be productive is really valuable, because everyone's stretched really thin right now. Like I try and listen to my colleagues and like listen to how sad they are. Like some of them are living alone, and man, I would kill to live alone right now. But like, there are various things that you can always say that someone's got it worse or something like that, but really try and be their outlet and listen to them and have empathy for them and really try and be as flexible of a manager as you can. so that people can live their life around working from home. I saw a really funny tweet that was like, can we stop calling it working from home and more like living at work? And that's kind of how I feel, but I love my job. But make sure you know that your team also feels that way as well.
Thank you so much. This was all very helpful. And I cannot wait for next week. We have the Growth Hackers Conference coming up September 1st. On September 2nd, we have these amazing speakers here bringing their latest materials, sharing with us, helping us implement or improve our processes with our teams. I mean, I'm sure it will be a blast. Thank you so much for coming here, Sean, and telling us all about your masterclass on September 2nd. And Dee, thank you so much. I know that you have a forecast. The weather around your area is not is not all bright and sunny right now, and you're still here. Thank you so much for that. And Sam too. Eric, if you're listening to us right now, thank you so much too for coming. And I'm sure everyone here is excited to see you. There are many more questions. I just want to, I know you have busy schedules, and I want to touch a little bit on the agenda for the first day and many other operational topics that you don't need to be around for. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm looking forward really for your sessions on September 1st and 2nd, Sean, and September 2nd, Sam and Andy. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you. So you don't go anywhere, please. If you're here with us live, I just want to share my screen and talk to you a little bit about what we have for the Growth Hackers Conference 2020. Let me go there and share my screen. Let me know, please, if you have my screen right now. I assume you do. So here it is. This is a guide, and if you are a Growth Hackers Conference attendee, or once you sign up to become an attendee, you will receive this guide right here. We tell you all about how to enjoy the 2 days of the conference. And you have here all these screens and the step-by-step that you go through to, one, access the platform, as well as update your profile on the platform. You will be receiving these links on your email a couple of days prior to the conference. So next week, you have everything there for you. You can access the stage area here. We are having one single stage, just like we used to when we were in person in San Francisco. And here you can ask questions to the speakers. We are having Q&A sessions right after each one of the talks. You have the ability to chat with people in the conference, so you can check everyone that is online, that is watching the talks. You can reach out to them. You can schedule one-on-ones. You can open the video if you're having a one-on-one with someone and have a quick call. You can also check on the people area. You check all the attendees that are there. On the agenda, you also see the schedule for the day. You get information from each one of our speakers. We have an amazing speaker lineup this year. You can find out more about the speakers by clicking on their pictures. And we also have access to the exhibitors and our sponsors' booths, where you can find out more about their offerings, their special offers, their products. You can ask questions live for them, as well as access their media, their materials. And if you want to join us on day 2, you can go now to growthhackersconference.com, upgrade your ticket, and you also have, with this upgraded ticket, you have access to not only all the talks on September 1st, but also all the master classes on September 2nd. If you are with us since the beginning of this panel, you know that Sean Ellis, the founder of Growth Hackers, he is bringing to the conference his exclusive framework and a talk, a deep dive into an executive jumpstart program for growth hacking and for the growth methodology. Eric Keating from AppQs is bringing to us what he is doing in terms of product-led growth through through automated and personal onboardings. Andy from IBM, you saw that Andy is bringing us a playbook for enterprise companies to align everyone and all the teams and run a growth program that actually works for a set of multiple products at the same time. And Sam Richard from OpenView is bringing us as her masterclass very deep study on more than 150 benchmarks in companies that are doing product-led growth properly. And she's bringing specifically best practices on acquisition and retention. So that's what the conference this year is all about. Let me remove my screen here. If you have any question on the conference, you can always reach out to us on conference@growthhackers.com. This is our email. We're there to answer any questions you might have. You can also go to growthhackersconference.com and not only upgrade your ticket, but check all of our agenda, every talk that is programmed to go on September 1st. We're super excited to have you. It's the first time that the Growth Hackers Conference is coming to you live and 100% online. And we couldn't be more excited about that. It is a great opportunity for us. We have thousands, hundreds of thousands of growth professionals in our community, and we can have them join us for the conference without the hassles of traveling, without having to go to San Francisco this year. But I mean, next year, hopefully things will go back to normal and we can also be there in person at the San Francisco Jazz Center. We have a date circle. It's June 3rd. Hopefully everything will go well up until then, and we can be again in person for the conference in 2021. And I cannot wait to see you there September 1st with us next week, the Growth Hackers Conference 2020. It's close, you guys. It's almost there. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this panel. I hope you learned so much with our masterclass teachers as much as I did. It was a blast. Thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.